In the annals of history, the name Cleopatra resonates as a symbol of beauty, power, and intrigue. But beyond the tales of queenship and alliances lies a lesser-known side of Cleopatra's life, shrouded in mystery and controversy. Supposedly very skilled in a certain form of lovemaking, she was referred to as Meriochane by the Greeks, a title that literally meant "she who opens wide for 10,000 men." Legendary accounts suggest that she performed acts of intimacy with 100 men in a single night, and it's believed that she even utilized her proficiency in this area to entice Julius Caesar along with the others.
Let's unveil the secrets of time.
Queenship and ambition, Cleopatra's path to power. The scorching Egyptian sun beat down relentlessly on the magnificent city of Alexandria. Founded centuries earlier by the legendary conqueror Alexander the Great, it was a beacon of knowledge, commerce, and power. Yet, in the year 51 BCE, a storm of intrigue and ambition swirled around the Ptolemaic palace. Within its grand halls, amidst towering columns and opulent mosaics, a teenage girl named Cleopatra the Seventh was poised to inherit a crumbling kingdom and write her name into the annals of history. Cleopatra's story is inseparable from that of her dynasty, the Ptolemies. They were not Egyptians by blood, but Macedonians, heirs to the vast empire carved out by Alexander the Great. One of Alexander's most trusted generals, Ptolemy, had seized Egypt upon his leader's death and declared himself king. The Ptolemies wisely adopted the outward trappings of Egyptian rulers, claiming the mantle of pharaohs, sons of the gods. The Ptolemies' penchant for family feuds bordered on the absurd. To keep their bloodline pure, in an echo of ancient Egyptian traditions, brother-sister marriages were the norm. Cleopatra's own father, Ptolemy the 12th, nicknamed Auletes, the flute player, was likely the offspring of such a union. The identity of Cleopatra's mother is uncertain, but historians generally agree that she was likely either Ptolemy the 12th's sister wife, Cleopatra the 5th Tryphena, or one of his concubines. If Cleopatra's mother was indeed Cleopatra the 5th, then she was the product of a brother-sister union, typical of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Incestuous marriages often produced physically and mentally compromised heirs, fueling cutthroat competition for the throne. When young Cleopatra, born in 69 BCE, looked into the mirror, it was the lineage of strong-willed women she saw reflected. Previous Ptolemaic queens had wielded considerable power. Legends circulated of Cleopatra I, who had defied her own son to rule alone. More recently, Cleopatra III had co-ruled alongside her sons, only to ruthlessly pit them against each other for ultimate power. Cleopatra the Seventh was said to be a captivating girl, though not a classic beauty. Her true power lay in her sharp intellect, a talent for languages, and a charisma that would later sway the most powerful men in the world. She received the finest education available, studying philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy the 12th, died in 51 BCE, leaving the throne to 18-year-old Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy the 13th, barely 10 years old. Prior to his passing, their father had assigned Cleopatra and her brother as joint rulers. Egyptian law required that the pharaoh have a male co-ruler, leading Cleopatra to marry Ptolemy the 13th, who was only about 10 to 12 years old at the time. This marriage was primarily ceremonial, as Ptolemy the 13th was too young to exercise any real power. Swiftly, she marginalized her brother's authority, authoring official documents solely in her name and imprinting her image onto coinage. Cleopatra's filthy secrets, decadence, passion, and betrayal. Opinions greatly vary regarding Cleopatra's physical appearance. According to Roman historians, she was described as a woman who displayed an impressive and perhaps even excessive pride in her beauty, and as having the beauty of a maiden. However, contrasting viewpoints abound concerning the authenticity of this beauty, some attributed to reality, while others consider it as a form of calculated promotion. Numismatic evidence, represented by coins bearing Cleopatra's likeness, implies that she had prominent facial features, including a sizable nose and chin. It's plausible that Cleopatra might have aimed to present herself in a manner that highlighted her authority over beauty, even if she did not possess the stunning allure often depicted in Hollywood. Her appeal lay in her ability to effectively utilize her charm, intellect, and shrewdness. Cleopatra is said to have hosted extensive celebrations that spanned multiple days and carried an air of sensuality. Allegedly, she organized these events in collaboration with her lover, Mark Antony. Together, they established a social gathering called the Inimitable Livers, alternatively known as the Society of Inimitable Livers. This community was known for embracing a lavish lifestyle and, as per historical sources, partaking in what some might consider extravagant and unrestrained behavior. During these festive occasions, participants engaged in feasting, playful games, and joyous revelry. These gatherings were typically situated on the outskirts of Alexandria, likely influenced by the worship of the god Dionysus. Furthermore, these events often featured unconventional performances, including what could be termed as provocative shows, with participants dancing unclothed while enjoying an abundance of drinks. Cleopatra's lover, Marcus Antonius, wrote in his letter,
"I was seized with love for Cleopatra and unduly delighted with the beauty of her body beyond what is fitting for the male mind. I was softened by her blandishments and nevertheless relaxed for her the restraints of marriage. The result was that she, despising me and my fear of the law, stained herself with adultery, and by no means moderately. Rather, after her woman's mind had set aside its modesty, to such an extent did she burst forth into shameful actions, that in one night, having donned her cloak to go out, she then slept with 106 men, a prostitute in the brothel. As she confessed, she had been so aroused in the tumescence of her rigid organ that she even left the brothel still unsatisfied. Although this was done most covertly, it did not escape my notice."
Cleopatra is said to have built a temple in which a dozen boys, slaves, fed her with various aphrodisiacs. With them, she practiced the erotic secrets she learned from the prostitutes in Alexandria every day. Some accounts claim that Cleopatra employed erotic methods and substances to enchant her lovers, including bathing in donkey's milk, reputed for its skin-softening qualities. Each day, 500 donkeys were milked to provide her with fresh milk for bathing, as she took great care of her beauty and complexion. During a period when Cleopatra and her Roman lover Mark Antony were separated while he fought in Armenia, Cleopatra traveled to Judea. There, she encountered Herod the Great, the client king of Rome, who already harbored resentment towards her due to Antony's gift of his territories to Cleopatra. Despite this tension, Cleopatra sought to engage in what was described as a criminal conversation with Herod. According to the historian Josephus, Cleopatra's intentions towards Herod were far from innocent. He wrote,
"Perhaps she had in some measure a passion of love to him, or rather, what is most probable, she laid a treacherous snare for him by aiming to obtain such adulterous conversation from him. However, upon the whole, she seemed overcome with love to him."
Uncertain about how to handle Cleopatra's advances, Herod convened a council of advisors to deliberate whether he should execute her for her treasonous behavior. The council advised against it, warning that Antony would seek revenge. Though Herod believed Antony would be better off if Cleopatra were removed, he heeded their counsel and chose to simply escort her back to Egypt. According to legend, Cleopatra fashioned a vibrating device for self-pleasure by putting angry bees into a hollowed-out gourd. In other versions of the story, Cleopatra sat on top of a papyrus box of angry bees. If true, she's not the only Egyptian to bring animals into the bedroom. There were accounts of men engaging in intercourse with cattle, women doing the same with dogs, and Egyptians successfully figuring out how to do the deed with crocodiles. Cleopatra used her resources to construct monuments, art, and philosophy that linked her to the goddess Isis. This wonderful act appealed to the strictly religious people who had already associated the pharaoh with God. Additionally, Cleopatra dripped Nubian gold every time she visited the Roman court. It was said, although the Roman elite would leave behind a devastating reminder of their wealth, modern scholars still view this move as strategic. Cleopatra's lavish attire reminded male leaders of who was funding the conquests of the ever-growing Roman Empire. However, the Roman poets and historians largely disliked Cleopatra and labeled her with numerous derogatory terms. Due to her influence over Roman men and her openly displayed sexual relationships, Cleopatra was consistently vilified by these writers. Poetry from the era of Octavian contrasted her with the emperor's sister, Octavia, the wronged wife of Mark Antony. Cleopatra, along with her sexuality, was mocked and depicted as a greedy, pleasure-seeking Egyptian who profited from a scandalous marriage. These portrayals, however, seem mild compared to those by Sextus Propertius, a 1st century BCE poet, who described her as a woman worn out by her own attendants. Juvenal claimed she frequented brothels at night, portraying her as a prostitute. Cassius Dio, a 2nd century Roman historian, went further, labeling her as a woman of insatiable sexuality and insatiable avarice. However, these smear campaigns against Cleopatra did not end there. She was also blamed for the death of Julius Caesar. The very senators who stabbed Julius in the back now condemned the Egyptian monarch who was raising Caesar's only son. The only recorded lovers we know of are Julius and Mark Antony, but Cleopatra was not married to either of them and probably had other lovers. However, it was only with these two powerful men that she became pregnant. For a woman who had successfully ruled an empire for over 20 years, these pregnancies could not have happened by chance. There is no doubt that Cleopatra was wise about the body and the prevention and promotion of pregnancy. She did not need modern contraceptive methods to protect her sovereignty. In fact, this was one of the reasons why famous Roman senators and philosophers accused Cleopatra of witchcraft, considering she was able to seduce these two men and intentionally have children with them. There are different versions of Cleopatra's attempts to get Octavian into bed, but they all end with Octavian resisting her. Octavian, who would later become Augustus, was the adopted son of Julius Caesar and the future first emperor of Rome. In one version, Cleopatra attempted to entice Octavian into a romantic liaison shortly after Mark Antony's defeat at Actium and his subsequent suicide. As a captive, she secured an audience with him. According to historian Cassius Dio,
She accordingly prepared a splendid apartment and a costly couch, and moreover arrayed herself with affected negligence. Indeed, her mourning garb wonderfully became her, and seated herself upon the couch. Beside her she placed many images of his father, of all kinds, and in her bosom she put all the letters that his father had sent her. She spoke in melting tones, and sweet were the glances she cast at him, and the words she murmured to him.
Despite her efforts, Octavian remained unmoved. By rejecting her, he maintained his authority and avoided being drawn into the same web that had ensnared other powerful Roman men. Cleopatra's failure to seduce Octavian marked the end of her attempts to influence Rome through her personal charm and ultimately sealed her fate. It wouldn't be long before Octavian and his biased elite of male senators went to war with Egypt. Cleopatra and Mark Antony would rally their allies only to find that all their allegiances would deflect to Rome. Given that Cleopatra had lost all her allies, Octavian's fleet crushed Cleopatra's in battle, resulting in the death of Mark Antony. For 22 years, Cleopatra succeeded in ruling an empire full of flourishing arts, philosophy, and trade. Cleopatra would be remembered by these final weeks of her life. It was a time of political oppression from all sides. Cleopatra must have known what would happen if she surrendered herself to Octavian. She would be taken to Rome, denounced as pharaoh, and subjected to public humiliation. Her children also became wanted prisoners of the Roman Emperor Octavian, and were therefore at high risk of being slaughtered. Rather than subject herself to these horrors, Pharaoh Cleopatra took her own life.